At first, John Barrow was disappointed not to be by himself to set up the Emperor's gifts. He was keen to practice his Chinese and also to learn more about China and its culture. But as part of a small international team, he soon started to have more authentic experiences, and he was interacting with lots of Chinese people, from servants through to the numerous sons of the Emperor, who became daily visitors.
To make amends for our uncomfortable lodging, we sat down to a most excellent dinner, very neatly dressed, and served in porcelain bowls. The best soup I ever tasted in any part of the world was made here from an extract of beef, seasoned with a preparation of soy and other ingredients. Their vermicelli is excellent, and all their pastry is unusually light and white as snow. We understood it to be made from the buckwheat. The luxury of ice in the neighbourhood of the capital is within the reach of the poorest peasant. And although they drink their tea and other beverage warm, they prefer all kinds of fruit when cooled on ice.
The main reason for the embassy was that Britain bought twice the amount of Chinese products as China bought from Britain. The East India Company had started growing poppies in order to sell opium, but the harvests were still so small that it wasn't impacting the deficit. So another part of the mission was to introduce new British products to a potentially huge market here in China.
No sooner were they taken out of their cases and set up in the room that visitors of all ranks, from princes of the blood to plain citizens, came daily to look at the presents. But more particularly at us, whom I believe they considered by much the greatest curiosities.
The visitors marvelled at swords that could split iron without receiving any nicks, carriages with suspension, a hot air balloon, and a planetarium, which John Barrow described as the most ingenious mechanism ever constructed in Europe, whose motions could show even the most irregular and erratic of heavenly bodies. But the most useful of gifts in the short term was a set of nautical almanacs, given to the self-styled Tribunal of Mathematics, a group of European Jesuit missionaries. They were employed by the Emperor to provide astronomical information, times of new and full moons, sunrises, sunsets, and eclipses. Govia, the titular bishop of Peking, had admitted to John Barrow that none of his team were qualified to do the work and had instead been reliant upon astronomers in Paris. The French Revolution had put an end to their correspondence, and so it was the nautical almanacs provided by Dr. Dinwiddie that had calculations based on the Greenwich meridian that then provided the dates for the Chinese calendar until the end of that century.
On the 17th of August, being the Emperor's birthday, all the princes and officers about the palace assembled in their robes of ceremony to make their obeisance to the throne in the Great Hall of Audience. On this occasion, placed on the floor, before the throne on 3 small tripods, a cup of tea, of oil, and of rice, perhaps as an acknowledgement of the Emperor being the proprietary of the soil, of which these 3 are material products. I was told I might remain in the hall during the ceremony if I would consent to perform it with them. They offered to instruct me in it. All the officers of government in every part of the empire made their prostrations to the name of the Emperor, inscribed on yellow silk on that day.
2 days after the ceremony, John Barrow arrived to find the doors of the Great Hall locked. The key holder wouldn't talk to him, and the officers of state were gathered in the courtyard, looking as if something terrible had happened, or was about to occur. Finally, Deodato arrived, but he too looked woeful. John Barrow, we are lost, ruined, completely undone. News had come that Lord Macartney had refused to comply with the ceremony of kowtowing. This ritual, which they'd encountered in Vietnam, involved lying down in front of the ruler, or a symbol of his rule, 9 times. To Kowtow means literally to knock your head on the ground. But believing that Qianlong and George III were equals, Lord Macartney would only do the same as he would for his own sovereign, which was to kneel down and kiss his hand. Qianlong agreed to a compromise, but there was no precedent for this in the annals of China, and so all of the officers of state were scared of the backlash. They were worried about what was going to happen after the British left.
天秋子民众，几时花公旗？国旗小旗啊，旗看比花衣。群臣斩官谈不过万无一，天朝无所缺，万国扬为一。
On the 1st of October 1793, the arrival of the Emperor was announced by a blast of trumpets. Along a road which had been freshly made and flattened like a bowling green to keep the dust down, the great and the good of China stood. Standards fluttered, music played, and they all bowed down to worship as Qianlong passed, carried aloft by 8 men. Once inside the Hall of Audience, John Barrow said that the Emperor looked at all of the British gifts with great care and attention, and he was especially pleased with the small team at Yuan Ming, and to show how satisfied he was, he'd ordered them presents. These consisted of rolls of silk and pieces of silver cast in the shape of ornate Manchurian shoes, a really fitting gift for John Barrow, a man who had travelled so far.